back to Friend Crush. I'm your host, Amber Akilla. This is my podcast where I talk about stuff and things, cute, chaotic, and critical thinking. I'm a DJ, creative consultant, and chaotic internet person, I don't know, based in Shanghai. And I'm really excited to introduce this week's episode. It is another Boy Confessions episode. This week's guest is quote unquote Ash, is the moniker we've given him. Very different episode to the previous Boy Confessions episode, which I also encourage you to listen to. And it's just interesting because both of these guests are kind of like similar in age. But where they're at in terms of like their perspectives on dating, et cetera, is like very different. And it goes without saying that, you know, I'm just presenting information and perspectives to you, whether it's mine or a guest's. I don't feel like we need to make any sort of conclusive conclusions from anything that is presented, because information is always developing and evolving and people are changing and perspectives are whatever. So yeah, I mean, if you get anything out of this episode, I hope it's entertainment, because I really enjoyed editing. I really enjoyed recording it. It was so funny. And yeah, if you want to further discuss anything that comes up in this episode or any other episodes, or you want me to discuss anything in future content, send me a message on Instagram at Amber Akilla or at friend.crush, which is the meme page for this podcast. And follow me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Follow me on YouTube. Subscribe, because I think I'm going to move to like talking videos rather than just audio podcast. I still have a lot of different things I want to talk about and explore, and I feel like maybe video format is going to be better. But I don't know. I'm so open to suggestions as well. So hit me up. And I hope you enjoy this week's episode of Friend Crush Boy Confessions. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being a guest.
Thank you very much for having me.
Introduce yourself. Okay, wait, no. Firstly, how did we meet? No, wait. Firstly, introduce yourself, and then you can recount briefly how we met, and then you can talk about your relationship status, etc. So age, location, job status / industry, relationship status.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks very much for having me, first of all. And so my name is TBD. We could just go with TBD. You could just call me TBD. That's not my real name, obviously.
Your name's Ash, I've decided.
Ash, that's great. Like the Pokemon trainer. There we go.
Yes.
I did always love Pokemon as well. I am based on the West Coast in the US. I am in my early to mid 30s. And I grew up in rural British Isles. It's probably a sufficiently vague way to put it. And I moved around a lot. I have moved around a lot in my adult life. I spent 10 years living in a place that is far away from where I was born, and then moved in Asia, and then moved to another place that is also far away from where I was born. Well, I already said I'm on the West Coast in the US.
Yeah, you can be specific. You're not on the record, Ash. It's all right. No one knows who you are.
Okay. Yeah, well, but it's pretty easy to determine, probably. There's not many people who've done all those things. But,
okay.
Yeah.
And what industry do you work in?
I work in entertainment. And I do a very niche specific job in the entertainment industry, which there's not many other people who do it. And so entertainment is probably the most specific I can go.
All right. Okay, so then how did we meet?
We met on a dating app.
We sure did. In my very short-lived stint on Tinder.
Yeah, when I think you were probably in your early 20s, I think, and I must have been in my mid to late 20s, I would say, probably 27 or so. I guess that would probably be around 2016, 17, when you first arrived in Beijing.
Yeah, 2016, I think, when I was on exchange. And what is your current relationship status? Are you single? Are you dating? Are you in a relationship?
Single and dating. Yeah, that's kind of been my relationship status forever. That's pretty much what I would. I wouldn't say I've ever been in a serious long-term relationship with somebody in the same city as I was in.
How long was your longest relationship?
Probably 7 to 8 months.
That's not bad.
When I was that I would say that was when I was 23, 24. So probably close to 10 years ago. Yeah.
Damn.
Long time ago.
So, where should we start then?
Well, I mean, I think it actually might give some context to what I'm going to say later. So if you want to talk about sort of early life, I was raised by a female entrepreneur, which I believe you were as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, because I've been thinking about guests that I want to interview, I know a lot of men and women actually that were raised by single girl bosses.
Right. I was raised by a married girl boss who I was her first child, but my dad's third. And I was possibly due to that, partially, I was showered with love and affection. And
Golden
basically,
child.
yes, essentially, which obviously I wasn't aware of at the time. Now I'm a lot more aware of. I was not, but it's not like it was a no rules situation. You know, there was a certain amount of discipline. I did probably, I got, in my early years, I feel like I got away with a lot. In teenage years, you start like testing those boundaries a bit. And I did, you know, there was a bit more pushback. And I was then breaking those boundaries so my younger siblings could walk freely across those broken boundaries. Exactly. Yeah. So what I'm saying
How many
is,
younger siblings do you have?
I have one younger full sibling and then two younger step siblings who came into my life when I was about 15-ish. So I wasn't, it wasn't a no rules kind of, you know, spoiled situation. Certainly not. But I was raised with basically, you know, a stronger relationship with my mum than my dad, for sure. And, you know, a working mum who was the one who was putting in the majority of like the thought and effort into my upbringing. Good, you know, solid relationship with my dad, you know, just sort of a standard dad-son relationship, but not much emotional vocabulary, but not in a way. On your
father's side.
Yeah, but not in a way that was, I don't think, particularly damaging.
So would you consider your father like a role model for you when you were younger, or did you have any other like male role models growing up?
Honestly, no. And that, I think, is a big part of the reason why I definitely gravitate towards older male role models. My dad was my role model till I was about 7, and then I realized that I didn't want to be a professional football player. And after that, it was like...
Is that what he is? Or
it was what he wanted. He wanted to be, and he probably would have been... I mean, it's not like he was gutted that I wasn't a professional football player. He's still, like, supportive. But yeah, like... that was kind of the extent of, I was like, oh, my dad's amazing at football. And then our relationship never really fully, like really develop that much beyond that. So, but it, you know, it's all good. But yeah, male role models, not really any in my early life. And then my stepdad is another one who came into my life when I was about sort of 13, 14. He's a great man, and he and my mum have an incredible relationship, and that I have studied and asked them about, and you know, sat them down and asked them how they did this so well second time around. But yeah, he is also a good. He would probably be a role model that I gravitated towards as well, I would say, in you know, 13, 14, early-ish life.
Were there any other women that influenced the way that you think you see your relationships with women, or
difficult to say. I mean, you know, all my primary school teachers were women, which I guess maybe that has some kind of connection with, female authority figures. The principal of my primary school was a woman as well. That's all I can think of, although I don't think of any of them as being sort of super involved in my development. But I mean, it's at that age, everything is influential in a way, but there's no one that really sort of stands out. Yeah.
So you're single and dating at the moment. How would you say that your like approach to dating or your attitudes towards dating have shifted over time? So like we met when I was in my early 20s, you were in your mid to late 20s. Now you're in your early mid 30s. That's a while.
Yeah, it's almost let's say close to a decade. I think so. I'll give you the whole history of how this evolved, right? Because I was thinking about this recently because someone asked me to look up a photo from ages ago, and I was looking back, and I basically looked back through all photos from when I was at the end of high school towards to now, pretty much, which is a very self-indulgent thing to do, but it was a lot of fun. And I found in high school, so I was in a small town in like the only private school, and I was and it's a small school. And I had younger siblings at the school, and I had quite a lot of authority as I was prefect, and I was on the first 15 rugby team and everything. I had quite a lot of clout at the school in today's vocabulary, and very big fish in a small pond. And was relatively good looking for that for that environment.
For the pool of people you're in.
for the pool of people. I just thought I was the shit and I could do anything. And so I had a lot of attention. And then when I went to uni, suddenly I'm in a big city, one of the biggest cities in the UK, and suddenly I'm nothing. And I'm like, but I'm still carrying this attitude of I'm the shit. So I just went around, but I wouldn't say like doing anything that you would think of as really reprehensible. It's just like I would just like say things that I just talked like I was the shit. And then like a lot of boys my age around the time, I discovered because I could get laid. I could go out to a bar and chat someone up and take them home, but I wasn't like if there was someone I really fancied, I had not much success. It was mostly about going to a bar, getting drunk, and taking someone home.
Okay, so you don't feel like you had any obvious insecurities in terms of like navigating dating or like navigating how to speak to women?
Oh, I was clueless. I was totally clueless.
Yeah.
Okay. and that was why anyone I actually really liked, it was very, very difficult to know what to do. And I had some very good looking friends who had the same issue and would just go like, oh, well, yeah, no, I don't care about that. I just want to go, I just want to go out and take home whoever. It was a way for all of us of avoiding like the actual courage required to, and knowledge and understanding required to actually, attract somebody that with somebody who you're actually attracted to. And then, and in parallel to this is probably quite influential as well. I did meet somebody in my hometown who was in today's vocabulary you would say a 10, and we got together, and she was a bit younger than me at the time. I was probably like early 20s and she was late teens, and that was just like mind-blowing explosions of like, I think you can call it love if you mean it, if you can say it and mean it. And I definitely was saying it and meaning it. We had a very deep connection. Well, I mean, like late teens, early 20s, but still I would call it real. And then but there was sort of on and off, but like it did feel like a very, we really understood each other. And then I went off to and did a year abroad as part of uni. And at that point I discovered and I wonder how much this is coming up in your conversations, but the game. And she and I basically kind of just let things drop, and I started to that book was a big turning point, I would say, in terms of like all the apparently counterintuitive things that one can do in order to attract women. And suddenly it was like,
what were like the main takeaways from that book?
Oh, just stuff that might seem obvious, but it was things like not really dressing outlandishly, and all this classic like behavior that now is seen as relatively problematic, but things like negging and teasing and all these like not diminishing your own value accidentally by being too subservient and stuff like that. And after reading that, I was like, holy shit.
No simping.
Exactly, and which wouldn't have had a word for it at the time. But yeah, that kind of stuff, and and I was like, holy shit, all this stuff works. I remember the first time
in terms of getting laid.
Yes, exactly. Right. I mean, the first time I was out at a bar, and I decided to use something that I'd just been reading the book, and I did something, and then like it was a girl I'd known for a long time, and then a friend of hers comes up to me later on and goes, "What did you say to Kelly?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know, I can't remember what I said." And she goes, "Well, apparently now she really fancies you." And I was like, "Oh my God, how did this happen?" And so anyway, so I go away to China, and not to a country in Asia, but people know that's where he lives, so that's probably where we met. For my exchange year, came back and had sort of, I felt like I'd outgrown a lot of that stuff, and then I got back together with that person that I was with from my hometown, and we then it was like, oh shit, we've both gone away for a year or so, really kind of grown as people, and now we are reconnecting and whatever, and we got super close, and then I moved to China with no plan to come back anytime soon. And so we did long distance for a year and a half.
Damn.
And I can say 100% hand on my heart that I never even thought of being unfaithful during that time. So yeah, it was.
Were you able to still see each other like over that year and a half? Like you would go back home, or like
couple
she would
times.
come visit you?
She never came to visit me.
So not like a regular thing.
No, but like we would talk pretty much every night on Skype back then, and just had like a lot of shared references and all this stuff. This is probably the closest thing to a proper deep relationship that I've ever had, I think. And then, long story short, she'd heard from somebody that I was cheating, which I wasn't, and basically broke up with me over email. And then a few years later we started hanging out again, and then realized that there was some unresolved stuff, and so stopped hanging out, and we haven't spoken in probably 8 or 9 years. But and then I walked into a big sports shop in Beijing and saw a poster of her 20 foot tall on the wall. And I was like, ouch.
Wait, what?
Is
she famous?
She modeled for one of these big companies.
And that's crazy.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, that hurts. So anyway, but I think that is probably, and that has kind of set up my expectation. Unfortunately, deep down, that set up my expectations for relationships. So, which is why I find it difficult.
Like in terms of the level of connection that you had with her, that's like your precedent and what you would measure any future connection you have. I don't think that's unfortunate necessarily, because it's like a great thing to have a very deep connection with somebody, although it's rare, so it can make it difficult. But I think I don't know, that kind of connection is important.
I mean, I'm happy.
It is sacred.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy to have experienced it. But and so now, this was like a model athlete who I had a very deep connection with just because of who I am. And so that that's. I remember thinking at the time, I'm never going to be able to date anyone else ever after this, and it's almost pretty much how it's played out. But anyway, so I moved to China, and I basically forgot about all the game stuff because also, it's a smaller world out there, and it was a small like expat community, and so I didn't really.
You didn't need it.
Well, yeah, no. Well, no. I mean, like it's. I don't know why, but it just all fell out of my head,
That would have been like mid 2000s, late 2000s.
Yeah, like probably like 2000. 2012, 13. Yeah.
Okay, 2010s.
Yeah.
When you moved, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I moved in 2010. We did a year and a half, and then so probably like 2012, 2013. And then, as you know, very small expat bubble, largely made up of people who are not going to be there for an extended period of time. Only people who I ever dated for, more than a couple of months were people who were also there temporarily, yourself included. And, I would use mostly dating apps and never... there's one person who I dated who was sort of in the expat community, but it was mostly people who were going to be there for a specific amount of time, because that just kept things simple.
So you feel like that's kind of sums up your experience in China, at least.
Yeah.
Do you think did it change much when you moved to the States?
I mean, it was one of the main reasons I moved here. Because I came here to visit a couple of times, and I was like, oh, wow. Because, you go through these cycles. There were a couple of people who late on in my experience in China, I was like, oh, damn, that was someone who I would meet someone and be like, oh, I do think I really like this person, and then it just wouldn't work out. And I was like, what's going wrong here? And I was like, oh, there's just not that many people, and so I'm taking these, ultimately rejections much, much harder than I should be, because it's just such a... small pool of people. And I came here and I was like, oh, that was totally correct, because there's so many people here. And then I was traveling so much when I moved here. I was traveling back to China all the time. I was going all over the place, so I was never here for more than often a few weeks at a time. Also not that great for dating. And then pandemic came, and then I was back home and didn't go on a date for an entire year, or living back with my family. Literally an entire year, and then came back here and kind of got stuck in that cycle again of dating people. And then it would often be as soon as I realized, I'd be playing it cool, being a bit standoffish, and then as soon as I realized that I was interested in somebody, it was almost like magic. Just on the day when there was one time I was dating somebody for I don't know, a few months, and then she was away traveling, and I was like, oh, do you know what? I feel like I actually quite miss her. And later that afternoon, she FaceTimes me and ends it, and that happened with a couple of people. And I was like, yeah, in a fairly predictable, almost 6-month cycle, which you could say on the other hand, meeting somebody that you like and can potentially see a future with every 6 months is actually a pretty good batting rate,
Yeah, not bad.
But
and 6 months is a decent run.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah. But it would be, it would be people. Well, I mean, look who you're talking to. But but it would always be there's just something's not clicking here. And it was actually after that experience, I'll tell you exactly. And this was the big thing that changed my perception of these things. With that particular situation, it was with a very interesting and open, so the person who was very open about her feelings and very, very smart, very able to explain herself. And so normally when this had happened, I just go, okay, no worries, plenty of other fish in the sea. Thank you for, it was nice getting to know you, whatever. In this situation, I was like, do you know what I'm going to ask? I'm going to ask what went wrong, or what that. I was like, could you explain why? And after a bit of back and forth, the only way she could put it is that there was plenty of compatibility, but no chemistry. And I was like, but what does that mean? And I started looking that up, and I got a lot of blogs that were aimed at women saying like, compatibility is all the stuff that, do you have shared culture? Or do you have shared life path? And do you have all this stuff? And then chemistry is just this magical thing that, it's either there or it's not. And, you can't force it and you can't. And I was like, what? That can't be the way humans mate, they're just based on what, literal chemistry, like pheromones? No, that doesn't, that doesn't scan. And so I dug into it a bit deeper. And what I discovered was basically that chemistry is attraction. And that was a bit of a light bulb moment, because I was like, oh, attraction is something that can be created. And that weirdly kind of diverted me back into and so I actually reread the game last year. And obviously there's a lot about it there's less about it that hasn't aged well that you would think. You would think like this thing now would just be totally, so out of touch. Actually, it's not as bad as you would think. But the way he talks about just the basic mechanics of how attraction comes about still holds true, I think. And so I was like, holy shit, I've been doing all this stuff totally wrong for about 10 years. I'd just forgotten all of the basics. And it's not just like, and the stuff I was focusing on now was not, the stuff that interested me more now was not the stuff like, if you are slightly mean to somebody or use like a barbed comment, they will start trying to qualify themselves. It wasn't like this trickery stuff. It was more like, what do people react to? And how and what healthy mindsets contribute to being an attractive person. And there's one book in particular so I read a couple of books on this over the last year, and there's one that was like, holy shit, wow, that is it was the book I'd been looking for, and it's called Models by Mark Manson. I believe the subtitle is How to Attract Women Through Honesty.
Is he the guy that wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck?
Yes, that guy.
Yeah.
And that really, things like a willingness to be polarizing, and the reason that you're polarizing is because you have opinions on things, and you don't, and you drop the fear of social rejection from the tribe around you. Because people don't agree with you.
That's like me.
Exactly, right, yeah. And that's just called living your truth. That's called being honest about yourself.
Or being authentic.
Being authentic, exactly. And not thinking, oh, what are people going to think? And so...
Yeah, most people aren't thinking. That's what I learned.
Right, yeah, true. And I then started literally watching YouTube videos on this kind of stuff. And isn't it funny that this, and if I would mention this to friends, male friends, and that's the other thing, I have almost no single male friends. I have maybe like fewer than 5 single male friends. And
so everyone's already wifed up.
Yeah, exactly.
And settled down.
Some of them have kids. They still out and partying and have great lives, but yeah, they also like married and have kids. Not that is a bad life, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So
wait, they're all like similar in age to you as well?
Similar or a little bit older.
Yeah.
So then I would start. I would mention this to someone, and they would be like, they would look at me as if I needed to see a psychiatrist. They'd be like, "What's wrong with you? What's you're like trying to get better at speaking to women. Like, I think you need to look inside you and see what's missing here." I'm like, what? I was like, this can't be. If I'd said, hey, because I mentioned to one friend, very close friend, I'm thinking of getting a dating coach, and there's this guy who makes YouTube videos who I think does coaching, and I think he would be an interesting. And he looked at me and said, I think there's something deeper going on here. I'm like, no. If I'd said to you, I want to get better at tennis, so I'm going to get a tennis coach, you'd say, good for you, man. Yeah, really taking this seriously. Going to get, your backhand is going to improve, and you get some expert knowledge from someone someone who's done a lot of that. That's great. But as soon as I talk about wanting to get better at doing the thing that is like the base human like motivation,
need
and yeah, and like the need to you know mate and reproduce. That's suddenly a taboo, and that's really really weird. You know.
Yeah, I guess there's less of a stigma when women embark on that journey. You know, it's like expected for women to constantly strive towards being in a relationship and like reshaping themselves to be in a relationship, figuring out how to better be in a relationship, how to understand their relationship, how to end their relationship. But I think there definitely hasn't, I didn't grow up in an environment or like in a cultural zeitgeist or lexicon where it was like advice or like information and resources that would actually help men to connect with women, not just like acquire or run through women. And I think now that like it is starting to shift a bit. And yeah, I mean, ultimately for me, I do believe that the most attractive thing, my personal theory, is that the most attractive thing that you can be is to be authentic to yourself. And that's not about like being like other people. It's like becoming more of who you are. And so much dating advice is like, how can you reshape yourself to be attractive in a conventional standpoint to the opposite gender or to whoever you're trying to attract? But like you don't need to actually attract everyone. You just need to attract the people who are going to appreciate you for who you are. So the more you are yourself, the more likely you are going to attract people that will appreciate that.
Exactly.
And then there's always so much disconnect in dating when I talk to people who say like, oh, you know, like they just don't really know me. And I'm like, that's because you're not yourself. That's because you're like in my friendship with you, you're authentic to who you are. But in the way that you date, you're pretending to be somebody else. And that person is connecting with the mask that you put on and not who you are because you're constantly hiding it. And then you're annoyed that they don't know who you are because you don't even show who you are to them. Anyway.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And you know, we are wired to fit in with groups, right? To want to fit in with groups because social, you know, in our wiring, social ostracization equals you know, you're out of the tribe and you've got to go live. Yeah, it's death. It's literally death, which is why we're all scared of this, right? And which is why approaching someone you're attracted to is also terrifying. Because you're like,
and I think awareness of that understanding is what's important. You know, like it might never go away, but when you realize like, oh, I feel this urge to be this way because that's what seems cool at the moment, even though it doesn't resonate with me. What is more important to me, being true to who I am and what I want, or fitting in a way that might like ultimately be of disservice to me? And there's always moments where you might choose to like fit in with the group just for like survival or whatever. But I think it's that awareness, knowing why you're doing it instead of just assuming that doing it is going to get you the outcome that you want, even though it might not.
Yeah, no, definitely. And isn't it weird how realizing that, which it all seems so simple, but most people are making their relationship choices based on, I mean, I know this is a very sort of trendy, hippie way to put it, but a scarcity mindset of, you know, oh, this is the only like I have to be with that person because that person I find so attractive, and you know, if I'm not with that person, I'm fucked. You know, like my life is screwed, and you know that is again that's coming from a place of neediness. And it's
I think that's just like how capitalism has infected our brains. That's how capitalism works, from this scarcity mindset. Like there's constant need to acquire, to profit, without really thinking about the consequences of what the things that we do in pursuit like will entail. You know, now we're dealing with a lot of those like issues. It's like, okay, maybe if we thought about the environment or if we thought about the impact on employees when making these sorts of business decisions, actual like connection with humans, connection with nature, then we wouldn't be in this like in this literal like dystopian hellscape. And I think also, especially with like advertising, people being chronically online, exacerbated by the pandemic, you're constantly being sold to. And whether you realize it or not, it's like ads don't say like, you're not pretty unless you buy this, but they'll say like, erase your imperfections with this product, do this diet for a perfect body. And implicit in all of that is like, you're not good enough. And like, if you're not aware of the way that messaging might be affecting your mindset and the way that you see yourself, the way you see your relationships, then of course it's like a given that so many people just haven't been able to question that, because it takes like time to yourself, time away from those things, and an awareness to be able to say like, I actually appreciate myself, or I'm grateful for my body and my relationships and my friendships, and I don't need to compare myself to other people. And I think like for me, just because of the education that I had and like the specific things that I studied, I had an awareness of that from a young age. So it's been something that I've been able to like work on and develop an awareness of for probably like longer than most people my age, I guess, because I feel like a lot of people my age are starting to realize like, oh, it's not that, those things aren't that important. I need to learn to appreciate myself. I need to learn to embrace who I am. So what I just want to say is that there's nothing wrong with you if that's like the mindset that you have going into things, because that is literally how you are conditioned, whether you realize it or not. And when you start to like peel back those layers of like the way that we're marketed to, the society that we grow up in, the education we receive, you're not given many opportunities to think otherwise. So I think being compassionate with yourself in terms of recognizing like, you know what, I didn't realize this, and most people don't realize this, but now I have an awareness which gives me a choice in how I want to move forward. And it is really difficult to choose like the more authentic path when you have that awareness, because it's easy to just do what everybody else does. But it's like this constant negotiation within yourself, like, what do I actually want? And like that can be buried under so many layers.
Yeah, and it's sort of like I think it's very easy to basically cop out and go, oh, I do, I don't want to sound like being judgmental, but to say like, oh, I will just do what everyone else does. But you won't get you'll constantly be frustrated with the results that you get. And you'll always think that you deserve better, but you're not willing to do anything about it. The advertising,
or entitled to something better that you haven't done anything
exactly
to earn.
The advertising point is an interesting one, because while I do agree that that particularly social media has kind of supercharged our, envy matrix, I'm really glad that I don't live in a time where the man with the biggest stick who could beat up everybody else to get to, and like could kill the biggest lion, and if you weren't that, you were gonna die or not mate. I don't think I would survive very well in that kind of a situation. So I do. I, there are certain, and now we have access through dating apps to everybody in the world. It's like
not me though, because I'm not on them.
Okay, well, fair enough. Well, no, and that's another topic, right? Because since changing my perspective on these things, I have started, as part of my belief that in honest action, I'm honest with myself about who I'm attracted to and who I'm not. That if I see somebody attractive, I will hit on them in public.
As you should.
Yeah.
As you should.
And I did, I've started doing that recently, and it just feels so much more human. I'm actually not knocking dating apps, because I actually really love them and I'm on them all the time. But because it's just the efficiency of it that I really love. Not having to rely on your people that you might bump into. But yeah, like I've just started, if I see someone in a coffee shop, I will go up and usually do a kind of a standard line that I'll do in coffee shops, but it kills, trust me.
Ash.
But yeah, just like going up and starting a conversation, and it doesn't always have to be a line. Sometimes you just go up and you go, hi, I'm Ash. I mean, I wouldn't say that because it's not my real name, but or why not? Well, the name that I actually say is not my real name either, because I use a nickname.
Oh God.
I go by my nickname in general. Anyway, and it just creates so much more of it. It is terrifying every single time though, because you can't not feel that. Maybe if you do it a billion times, it becomes less terrifying, but.
But I think it's good that you get nervous or excited about things that you care about. Like, obviously, you care about connecting with people and finding someone, being in a relationship. So there's no reason why it shouldn't make you nervous. And I also think, like, for me, from a woman's perspective, like when I date guys, as someone who doesn't use dating apps, part of the process of dating somebody that you do actually like and you do connect with is like when the guy tells you how nervous he was to ask you out or how nervous he was for the date. Like, you know, like that's vulnerability, and that's what like is so important in authentic and genuine connections, and something that women value a lot in relationships that a lot of men don't understand is important to us.
Definitely.
Not just to us, but also for them. Like for them to be able to say like, it freaked me out, like asking you out.
But at what point you have to already be feeling attraction to him for that to be a positive to you? Because if some guy who you're not that into says, "Oh, I'm really nervous," you'd be like, "Yeah, you should be." You know?
Yeah, they don't say that they're nervous. Like but it's like finding that balance. Like you're nervous about asking somebody out or striking up a conversation, but you know you still go for it and you are true to who you are. You don't say like, "Oh, I'm so nervous to ask you out." They say like 3, 4, 5 dates in, like I was like nervous to ask you out. Or, I was so nervous on our first date. And I think at the same time, like just because you're nervous about something doesn't mean that you're entitled to it going well. It's just like the process of learning.
Yeah.
And growing. You know, like I still feel nervous when I DJ. I've been DJing for 10 years.
Yeah.
But I'm nervous because I'm excited, because it's something that I care about and something that I constantly want to be able to develop. The same way that you might be nervous even in your relationship to have a difficult conversation, to be honest with them about how you feel. Like that's totally normal. It's just part of being a person.
I do feel that there's a difference in the kinds of nervousness though between, you know, me, you know, I play football, right? And if I'm going into a big game, the difference between me being nervous going into a big game and Cristiano Ronaldo being nervous going into a big game is so different. Because I don't.
But you're not Cristiano Ronaldo.
Well, no, exactly. But my point is, I'm nervous because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, really. Whereas a professional has done it so many times that they are less nervous about it, and that the lack
more
of
excited.
Exactly, and the lack of nervousness will allow them to perform better, that lack of nervousness comes from practice. So yeah, like that's why I do feel like that nervousness. You know, the more you go out there and talk to people and be less scared. Don't be so scared of failure and being and
great
rejection.
Message to all the boys listening and women too. And thems.
Message to everybody. But I do feel like having, just to switch gears a little bit, like the difference between, that was such a podcasty phrase. Just to switch gears a bit. You know, through listening to a lot of this advice, and you know, I think I'm fairly good at picking apart what is useful and what is trash. As a man, even if you're not really good looking and really, you know, well off or you know, super ambitious or whatever, even if you just use some like dumb tricks, you're going to probably have some success with women.
Yes.
Whereas
I literally saw a TikTok that was like when he's a little bit ugly and has a dad bod, and it was like, that's my type. This is my song. Nobody says that about women.
Exactly.
Publicly.
Yeah, exactly. This is my point.
The idea that men go on the internet and say, it's so hard for me because as a man, you have to be a provider. I'm like, you could literally be a 3 objectively as a man, and you could still probably catch a 10. If that 10 had low self-esteem. But
really, I mean, a 10 maybe not, but you can definitely punch above your weight.
Hot girls date ugly guys all the time. And hot girls get their hearts broken by toxic dudes too.
Yes, but those toxic men will be toxic because they are narcissists, basically. I'm kind of quoting Mark Manson now, but a guy who's a 3 can maybe use some tricks to trick someone who's way more attractive than him, but is like on the wrong day for her, but still he still has to.
He can still practice. At the end of the day, he needs to learn to be himself.
But yes, he definitely does. But what I'm saying is, this is the reason why it's unfair for women, is because he can still fake it, fake the things that are going to trigger attraction. It won't last, in general, unless he makes a genuine commitment to improve himself. But
important point.
But yes, exactly. But you can then do that. And if he chooses to, he can do that. And then let's all hope this imaginary person did do that. But for women, there isn't. It's more difficult. And there was one question in your sort of topics that you were floating, which is really difficult. Which is the difficult thing is that a lot of this advice really goes against our kind of modern ideas about how people should interact with people in general.
So what do you think the difference is? So what do you think, like, you were doing or you were told to do, believe that you should do, and how is that different to your approach now, generally speaking?
I think, naturally, and I don't know if I was conditioned or told to do this, like, naturally, I can be a bit of a people pleaser. I just want everyone to have a good time, and I harness that into hosting parties. Because that is a good instinct when you're trying to host a party. Trying to please everybody is not a good strategy for attracting people, because you're just trying to be everything to everyone and not being authentic. And so you become really obsequious, and you become, or to put it more simply, a simp. And because you're trying really hard to make somebody, you're trying to do nice things for people, to someone, to make them like you, or all that kind of stuff, which is
so
hard
in a way that's like takes away from you being who you are. I think it's like finding that balance between sharing and giving and being generous to people that you care about, but doing it in a way that means that they also see you, rather than just you like being consumed by their image and what was going to make them happy, but also showing parts of you so that they can also return the favor, so it's an exchange and not just like a one-way like people pleasing dump.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like I just all kinds of little things, like changing my plans. I remember there was someone who I was seeing last year who, we went to meet up, and I was like, but it was on a night that I had some work stuff to do. And at one point she was like, oh, don't you have to get back for work stuff? And I was like, oh, it's all right, I can change it. And then she was like, no, don't change it. And I thought to myself, why am I changing my work? Like, the work really matters to me. Why am I changing it for this person who I haven't even slept with yet? I was like, that doesn't make any sense. So things like that, which is hard. And that was last year, after I'd already started trying to change my perceptions of these things. They're so hardwired that they're really difficult to undo. Honestly, reading all this stuff really gave me, it made me feel so good. It was like a balm. It made me feel, oh, right, this, like, you can improve, especially that Mark Manson book, when it was about, like, you can improve.
You
and you
have
don't
a choice.
Yeah, exactly. And, your question about how would I feel about women making the first move was an interesting one, because my totally honest answer to that is I'm not sure I like it.
For you personally?
Yeah, for me, because...
Okay, for me to clarify, I would say there's ways that women can signal to a guy that she's interested without necessarily making the first move. I guess like making the first move in this context, in the way that I ask and define it, is like a girl asking a guy out, like point blank, right?
Yeah.
But I do think there are ways that girls can like flirt or show interest in a guy that's not necessarily asking them out, and then it's like up to the guy to use his little brain, the two little brain cells rolling around in his head, and be like, oh, wait, this girl's cool. Okay, yeah, she is. Maybe I can, ask her out and see what happens without feeling entitled to a yes answer, because, people just be flirting all the time. It's whatever. But, yeah, I think that's an important thing to distinguish, because I feel like people think even what you were describing before, like being a people pleaser, learning that it's not like the way to be authentic. Not that it's like one or the other. Like either you make everyone happy or you make no one happy and you're completely self-centered. It's like finding this middle ground, the balance in between. That's like, how can I give and share and contribute to relationships while maintaining my sense of self and while making sure that I'm being seen as well, and that person feels connected to me and not just me trying to plug into them. The same way that I think when it comes to like the beginning stages of courtship and any relationship, it doesn't have to be like one person completely swallowing the other person and like picking them up and taking them away. For me personally, I think it is like that push and pull that comes with different signaling, flirting, and then like you're building up to being asked out or to the first kiss or to the first night together, whatever. But that's very interesting that you prefer to be the initiator.
Definitely. But
and I think most men do.
But what you say,
they're afraid, so then they say that it's a girl's responsibility.
Exactly.
But anyway.
Yeah. But what you said is very true. I don't like if a girl came up to me and like asked me out. I I would probably see that. You know, my instinctive reaction would be, what's wrong with you? You know, because if she was like, well, you know, it's not like I've never been asked out by a girl before, but it's mostly like, you know, not somebody who I would have asked out. You know what I mean? Or like, you know, I was like on a work trip recently, and I was at like a work party, and someone, I mean, yeah, it wasn't technically a work. Anyway, someone was like, "Oh, my friend over there, like really wants to sleep with you," and I was like, that immediately makes me not want to sleep with that person. Instinctively, it's a value thing. It's like, why is this so easy? You know,
yeah, you want to feel like you've put some effort in, or that you've quote unquote earned it.
Exactly.
Like, that's just a natural human thing. I think it's this dichotomy between like, naturally as a human, like we want things to be easy, but if it's too easy, then we take it for granted. So you need to find the balance between like investing, contributing, and then also doing it in a way that doesn't feel like you're scaling Mount Everest, like without any protective gear, you know, like finding that balance. It's not one or the other.
Yeah, no. But if I could sum up my my attitude to dating in 3 words, it's no protective gear. No, but what you said was very apposite about Signals. You know, I have, let's say, for example, recently I was at a party. I saw someone I was attracted to. It was quite a small party, so we had a lot of mutual friends there, but I'd never met her before. I thought she was really attractive. And I started talking to her in a way that I think was, you know, not creepy and
respectful.
And I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
But you know, I was in a good mood. I was feeling good. I was feeling myself, right? And then she started asking me questions like, "Oh, where did you get your jewelry from? Because I'm trying to buy jewelry for my brother, and I never know where to buy men's jewelry. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's a question that is showing interest in something about me, right? Noted. Women do these things subconsciously a lot of the time, I think. She might not have even known why she was asking that question. I doubt that she actually wanted to buy jewelry for her brother.
I can't speak on like the female psyche in this circumstance because I generally approach all men as asexual unless they specify otherwise.
Well, and that's the other thing. That's the thing that kind of conflicts a little bit with our modern concept of how people should treat each other. I will, not aggressively, but I will initiate physical contact with people. And, you know, that is part of my way of expressing myself. I will touch people on the arm, or, you know, playfully, or, you know, stuff like that. And it's this little dance that humans have been doing for millions of years, where like, you know, millions of years, but you know what I mean, where they, you know, there's this like, oh, someone shows a tiny bit of flirting, and someone makes an approach. The other person either like challenges.
Yeah, they either step forward or step back, depending on.
And sometimes they do both at the same time. They challenge. They like, it's what is in like in that whole like, you know, world of game is referred to as a shit test. Which might be an interesting thing to look up. It's when someone throws some shit at you and sees how you deal with it. So here's an example. And this is an example from a dating app. There was some girl on a dating app who had a photo of herself with like a shit ton of food. I can't remember exactly what I said first. But then she responded, "No, I'm just a massive fat ass." And that's like, what am I supposed to say back? That's a challenge, right? It's like, are you confident enough in yourself to deal with that? And what that shows is she's interested enough to give me a test. And you know, and you can choose to do to respond to that test however you want. I said something like, and if this sounds like I'm really proud of myself for saying something funny, it's because I am. Because I could be like to do the thing that we talked about before, the low value thing, which is to say, oh no, you're
Maybe 'cause you
not.
are.
No. It would be to say no. Like the low value thing on my side would be to say,
Yeah.
oh no, you're not. No, you fat. No way. You know, oh, you're so beautiful. And like the asshole thing to do would be to be like, yeah, you totally are. I decided to do something that was not too far from that, but I said something like, yeah, it must be tough having to buy 2 seats on the plane or something like that. That like shows, you know, there's these little tests. So when women are curious about you, they will challenge you. I know for a fact that you have done that you do this, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my Tinder bio when we met. It was, your mum didn't like gestate you for 9 months in order for you to come out and be a fuckboy.
Exactly.
You matched with me.
Exactly.
And now we're doing this podcast.
Exactly. It's a challenge, you know. It's and I think that is a good thing to respond to, you know. So anyway, I saw that happening, and I saw a couple of little tests happening, and it's this dance, right, of like you said, push and pull, of like. And it's so nuanced because it's like someone giving you a little test like that is actually flirting, or it's the precursor to flirting. And then if you pass the test, you can then, you know, flirt and tease a little bit. And that is so much fun, right? When you have that, when you're in that mood with somebody.
Flirting is the best.
It is. It's amazing, you know, and it sometimes just comes out of nowhere. But then how do you go from that? It's so nuanced, and that's the thing. I love it so much. That like dance and like I said, like I have not been in an actual relationship for a very, very long time.
So, okay. You realize that you enjoy the flirting dance, which I think on some level you've always known that you've enjoyed, just based off my understanding of you as a person.
I enjoy being better at it now, though.
Okay, that's good. I think most people enjoy it, but I feel like a lot of people are crippled by fear of rejection.
Mm-hmm. True.
And as you have said very well, that it just takes a bit of practice and being okay with people saying no and not taking it personally, especially when it's very, very early on. Like I think, you know, sometimes people get really invested in the image of somebody or who they could be to them without even really knowing them. And then that's how you take that's how the rejection feels like you're going to die. And it is like okay to feel sad when you don't get what you thought you wanted or what you want, but also being able to process that and then being able to trust yourself more than you rely on trusting other people to like make you feel safe, I think. And that's something that's taken me a really long time to do. And it's a continuous process as well, like recognizing that at all stages of your life, there are going to be things that don't work out for you. And like you need to learn how to build resilience around those things. But okay, so you've sort of shifted the way that you see yourself and the way that you approach dating. I want to know, like, if you grew up having like a idea of the type of relationship you should be in, and I think for a lot of people, especially in our generation, it's like being in a, like having a wife, having children, buying a house. Like the last guest that I spoke to talks about how this was just like what he assumed that he should strive for. And so did you have anything that was similar to that, or like your own definition of that, whether you were conscious of it or not, or have you noticed? And then like, what kind of relationship are you looking for? Or like, how have your expectations around the type of relationship you quote unquote should be in versus the type of relationship you want to be in? How has that changed, if at all? Please share with the class.
Well, first of all, I never thought I'd live this long, so I'm just sort of running on no plan. No, I'm kidding. I guess I always kind of had an underlying default assumption that I would get married and have kids and stuff, and I would quite like to do that. It's never been the goal for me.
I feel like when I knew you, when we first met, you were in a stage of your life where you felt like you needed to have boxes checked by a certain age or by a certain time. Like you felt like you were on a time crunch to be settled down, to live in a certain place or to whatever. Like, so do you still feel that way now? Like, is it like you've gotten older and that age has just shifted further down, or you've like let go of the idea that it has to be by a certain age?
I think probably somewhere between the two. Moving here where the culture is so different really made a big difference, I think, where my friend group goes from early 20s to 50 and people doing all kinds of really dope stuff throughout that range. Some of them married with kids, some of them divorced, some of them never been in a relationship. You know, as I said, not many single people, but that is what the amazing diversity of this city that I live in is. This generic nameless city in which I live has helped with, because it does open your eyes to like, wow, there are so many people doing lots of different things. So
at different stages of life as well.
Different stages of life, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just killing it and having a great time. And while I'm not necessarily out there looking for someone to marry, I also wouldn't be opposed to it. There's the experience. I would like to experience having a healthy adult relationship that's more long term than a couple of months. That's one thing, and a bit of just maybe some experience commitment for the experience itself, and also for to enjoy the experience itself, and also for practice, really, because I don't have any experience of long-term commitment, and most people when they get into relationships at my age, they would already have had maybe a couple of years of a relationship, and I haven't had that. So there's sometimes I think like, oh, maybe that's like gonna be a step. Or maybe it's going to be a disadvantage if I don't have that experience. That's not a reason to get into a relationship, obviously, but it is a this is my practice.
I'm going to practice with you.
Well, people have there was that term practice wife. Yeah. So, but then, oh my god. So a lot of my friends are just having kids recently, and it really. One of my best friends has 2 kids. 2 of my best friends have 2 kids. Some have 3. I have one friend who has a couple of kids who I used to party with all the time, and I know that's a big part of his life, and he now lives a very domestic life, still with a lot of it, I think as much excitement as you can have in that life, and he will definitely be doing more of that when the kids are older. But we were on the phone the other day, and we had to delay our call because he's like, oh, sorry, I got pulled into bath time. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so fucking glad I don't have to do bath time. And I was like, I can just go out and do what I want, and I'm loving what I'm doing, and I love the way my life is, and I love that I'm still having all these any experience that I want, I can have it, and I can choose to go and travel across Europe for a month and do whatever I want. And I really like that I am in a place, I feel so lucky to be in a place where I'm free to have all these experiences and spend more time on discovering who I am, discovering who
everyone's
I've become.
Always discovering who they are.
I think it's more discovering who I am becoming, because it's not like, it's not like all this experience is to go, who actually am I? I think who you are is built by those experiences, right?
Yes.
Because a lot of people say that, like, just find out who you really are. This is a bit of an aside, but I got into a debate with a very close friend who was saying that, like,
yes, you do.
Yeah, that's a good thing. If you don't have close friends that you're getting into debates with, then you've got the wrong friends. But it was about this movie where a family is on a skiing holiday. The movie's called Force Majeure, and family on a skiing holiday, and there is an avalanche, and the dad of the family, in a split-second decision, an avalanche is like coming over their lodge that they're in, and they're out on the deck, and the dad just goes like, snaps in that moment, fight or flight. He shoves his kids out of the way and he runs. And the rest of the movie is about the tension that causes. And my friend was like,
because it's not the wife.
Oh no, because no, he just shoves them out. No, as in like he shoves them almost into harm's way so he can get away himself, right? Okay. And my friend, I was discussing it with a friend, and he was like, yeah, imagine in those moments you really find out who you are. I'm like, no, you don't. That's a split second fight or flight response that none of us are in control of, and you can't, like, no matter how good of a person you are, fight or flight is not your decision. That just happens. That's on an animal instinct level. That is before your brain gets to process it. Your sensory organs are taking in this information and making the decision on your behalf, and you have very little that you can do to influence that. Where imagine this person has spent their whole life being a great father and a good person, and standing up for what they believe in, standing up for less fortunate people, and then in that one single moment we're supposed to, it's like, and in the way he was saying, it's like, oh, that's when you find out who you really are. No, you fucking don't. That's bad luck. So I think the same thing about what I'm spending your time, the freedom for not having kids and not being in any long-term relationships has allowed me to spend more time figuring out what I like and what I don't like, and hopefully, sounds really wanky, but like developing a richer inner world. Not saying that people who get married early don't have rich inner worlds. Just not saying all of them do. Just most of them. No, I don't mean that. But
so do you because I mean, at the end of the day, there's the things that are considered like what you should do, like settling down at a certain age and having kids. And some people do that and they are really fulfilled by it. And some people do it and they aren't. And then I think there's less discussion or representation, maybe not so much now, but back, at least when I was growing up, like you didn't see that many, especially women who were like in their, at any age, basically doing what they wanted or exploring the world and choosing not to settle down. And I think for a lot of men as well, there is a lot of pressure for the guys who have a lot of friends that have chosen to settle down but haven't. And like, I guess checking in with yourself to see what you really want. If you're surrounded by people who have settled down and you haven't, there is like a natural tendency to think like, is that something that I want to do because everyone else around me is doing it? And then you have to check in with yourself and think like, it is something that I might want in the future, but it's not something that I need right now because I'm enjoying where I'm at and exploring that further. And it doesn't have to be that one is better than the other. It's just like, what is actually right for you? And I think that's very important to ask before you get into a committed relationship and settle down, because I think a lot of people don't actually do that. And they're just like, oh, we've been together for 3 years. Let's get married. Now we're having children. Oh my God, what is my life? I hate this. Yeah. And I'm going to push my family out of the way if an avalanche comes.
Out of choice, not out of fight or flight.
Yeah.
Out of insurance claim.
Yeah. So I think like for me personally, my point of view is like, it's not really about one being better than the other, which is not what you've said, but I'm just clarifying for the sake of this episode. Like, it's more about figuring out what it is you want, because you will get to a moment in your life where you're like, I do want to settle down and I'm ready for that and that's what I'm going to work towards. Maybe. Or there might be a time where it's like, I don't want to do that, or I never do. Like, everyone is going to be different. And I think figuring out what you want, not just what other people are doing, what should I do? It's like, other people are doing that. Do I like that picture for me or not? Yes, no. And then like go from there, instead of like, my life is better than yours, this is better than that. It's just what's actually right for you as an individual.
Yeah.
Which can be hidden under many layers.
Totally. And it was, it was just in that moment where, as you said, like, if you've got people, everyone around you, including some of your best friends, are having this whole experience of life that I'm not having, right? And that I would like to have at some point, I think. So normally when I talk to people who are in that situation, that's what I'm thinking. There's a little bit of like thing in my mind that's like, oh, maybe I'm doing it wrong, right? Because as humans, we're always thinking that. But then it was just in that one moment, I was like, actually, I'm so glad I don't have to do bad time. But and also to sort of add on to your point there about, do you want to get into a relationship and you should go into it open-eyed? People should also, like you said, check in with themselves, because it is also okay to change your mind, because sometimes you think you want something and then you don't. And that happens a lot. And people also have that, like, what is it? I've forgotten the name of the term. I think it's a kind of a bias, but sunk cost bias, I believe it's called, where you go like, because I've because I've already gone for this and I've spent so much time on it, it's like, it's a bad idea to reassess it, to even allow myself to think about reassessing it. But then on the other end, you get people who just like get into something and then just go, actually, I changed my mind and I don't want to be in this relationship anymore.
Yeah, I think finding the balance again, like that came up in the last recording I did, the sunk cost bias. And I think it's the same, like sometimes I think you just need to go for what you think you want in order to figure out if it's what you actually want, you know, in like varying degrees. Because it's very easy to get crippled with this like paradox of choice, or this fantasy you might have for what you want or what you think you want, what you could have, while doing absolutely nothing to figure out if it's going to like feel as good as you think it is in reality. And then I think being honest with yourself and the people around you, like when you realize that what you thought you wanted isn't what you wanted, or readjusting what that might look like. Because at the end of the day, it's like you're never going to get what you want if you're never honest about it. And I think a lot of the times, you know, for example, like the idea that women go into casual relationships when they really want a relationship. It's like, if you really want a relationship, do not settle for someone who only treats you in a casual way, period. If you want a casual relationship, be honest about that. And if the guy can't handle it, then he actually isn't cut out to be in a casual relationship, and he wants you to be subservient to him. He wants you to want to be in a relationship with him so he can have the upper hand, whatever. Like recognizing that as it is, rather than thinking that it's going to be any different to what you've already experienced, especially if you haven't communicated it, especially if you've communicated it over and over again and you keep not getting what you want. You know, like I always hear about women who are in a quote unquote situationship. What the fuck is that? Like, I don't know what that is. Because to me, it's like either you want to date me or you don't.
Yeah.
Either you will claim me or you won't.
Yeah, that was in your in the, you know, the topics, and I was like, I don't really know what that means.
Yeah.
So,
but it's quite common apparently. Like you go into something and there's like deception on both ends, right? Like the woman deceives herself into thinking that she'll get what she wants, even though this guy isn't honest, or even though what he says and what he does doesn't match up, you know, because a guy might say like, yeah, I do really like you. Let's just see where this goes. And like it goes on for like 4 months without them ever being serious when that's something that the girl wants. But yeah, it's like you can't like compel someone into being who you want them to be at the end of the day, or giving you what you want if like that's just not what they want. And it's obviously a longer road when you are focused on like connecting with people who you do align with, or aligning with yourself to align with others better. But it will be much more fulfilling and much easier actually than pretending.
Yeah, it involves so much. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's counterintuitive, but it's stuff that goes against. It's hard, right? It's really hard.
Yeah.
To do that, because it's long-term gratification rather than short-term, and we're so bad at doing what is in our long-term interests, because it's a different. It's like that's going to benefit some guy in the future who I don't even know, right? Because it's not me. And then it's like, can I benefit myself right now? This person who I know and who's sitting here, yes, I can. So I'm going to do that thing, and we're built to do that, because we didn't think we were good with the idea of like, we're just fucking overgrown monkeys, right? Like we're just that's all we are. And you look at a monkey and you're like, you don't know about like next week, you know, like you don't know about like the idea, you know, we're not too far from you. So it's not surprising.
We do have iCal though, so.
Yeah, it's true. We got and I drive a car. You've seen a monkey? I'm sure there's monkeys that can drive a car. Damn, they're catching up. But no,
I think yes. On the one hand, I think it is. There are valid points in terms of like, you know, how we're wired as human beings as well, evolutionary perspective. But then I think it's like, well, we're not monkeys. We are descended from them, but we have been afforded this ability to process information in a high level way. And if you constantly, which is not what I'm saying that you're doing, but again, clarification, like people who constantly default to, well, your primal urge is this because you're wired this way. It's like, yeah, you're wired that way, but you also have been given like this part of your brain that allows you to take a step back and actually assess long term. And if you give yourself the opportunity to do that and be honest with yourself, then you will have much better long-term outcomes than just thinking, I want to satisfy myself now, so I'm going to eat this packet of cookies versus my long-term goal is to remain healthy and not get diabetes. So I'm just going to have one cookie and then a salad instead.
Yeah. And that is the reason why we're sitting here talking through a computer and not scratching around on the ground, right? Is because
Yes.
we have that, because our ancestors were able to do that.
Yeah,
And
believe that you have the ability to make those choices, I think.
Yeah, no, and you do. I'm just saying it's hard, and I understand when people fail.
Yeah.
And I also understand when I fail.
Yeah, and the environment that we're in does definitely prioritize instant gratification now more than ever. I think that there is a tendency for people to assume like, oh yeah, this problem applies to everybody else but not me. I'm the exception. Everybody thinks they're the exception to the fact that we are constantly bombarded with this idea that we can have the perfect body tomorrow, the perfect relationship tomorrow, the perfect skin tomorrow. Like, in my personal experience, everything takes at least minimum 6 to 8 weeks if you want to make a habit change in your life. So I think just being honest with yourself and being like, yeah, okay, I do have the urge to want this tomorrow, but I also need to remind myself that it's going to take a bit of time for me to practice changes in a way that become like second nature to me, and then allow me to actually like go beyond the scope of wherever I'm at now. But because we think like, oh, I can just talk to this. If I don't like this person, I can just talk to this other person. Yes, you need to cut off toxic relationships, but also you need to give connection and attraction a chance to build, not assume that it's like something that you either have or you don't have, like you said. Attraction, in my experience, definitely can build over time. I don't necessarily like, when I think about the guys that I've dated, I haven't necessarily been attracted to them off the bat, maybe curious about them, and then from getting to know them, you build a relationship or you build a shared experience, which is then something that becomes attractive and something you want to invest more in. It's not like I saw him from across the room and I knew we were going to get married. Like, maybe there's no, that's never been the case for me. But yeah, I think I try to give like a grace period for everything, regardless of whether it's a friendship or a relationship or a job or whatever. And it's not as simple as like, oh, I've just got to invest more now because I've invested so much already, or I've got to just cut it off.
I kind of think there's another way in which men and women are slightly different, because men definitely do look at someone across the room and go like, I want to impregnate her.
Yeah, that's what I was
Right.
going to say. Like, for me personally, I don't have that, but I know that guys can tell straight away, right?
Well, physical attraction,
At least like
yes.
if they're attracted, like they know, what is it? Like, okay, problematic, but this like 2-second rule, like a guy knows within like 2 seconds of meeting someone if they would want to sleep with her or not. Doesn't mean that they will, doesn't mean that they will pursue it, but like they know on a primal level.
Yeah, in general, yeah, I would say.
Yeah.
That's there's probably exceptions to that. And I've definitely become more attracted to women when I find out how confident they are before. But yeah, in general, we have this wiring where we look at someone and go, I think that the next generation of my family would look great with half of your genes and half of mine.
Yeah,
that's
I'm sure
not a conscious
girls definitely
thought
have that
process.
too, to a degree, but maybe not necessarily like at the same response time.
Well, yeah, but I think the things that that men and women are, so there's this whole thing of like survival versus replication value, right? Men tend to be a lot more driven by replication value because they're thinking, next generation of my family, I want them to be strong and attractive, and I like the gene and a certain waist to hip ratio or whatever the hell we're programmed to be attracted to. Whereas I think the biological default for a lot of women is to prioritize survival value. It's like, this is a scary ass world, and a man with resources, or seemingly the ability to acquire a lot of resources, is going to be more attractive, and that takes longer to understand that. And not even resources to understand and protect me, and that's why confidence in men comes off as so attractive, because it's like what you're signaling is, I know how to deal with the world, and I have status, or I look like I sound, I am able to behave like I might be able to achieve status. So I think that is another thing that's like different and results in different mating strategies, I would say.
Yeah, like I think the confidence thing and the way that it is emphasized to men in terms of dating is really interesting, because I was talking to a guy about how, what I said before, like I think one of the most attractive things to anyone of any gender is authenticity, someone's ability to be themselves and embrace who they are, and confidence that comes with that. And I think that that kind of confidence isn't necessarily like the stereotypical, like braggadocious, like how do you say, like arrogance that is usually like associated with confidence. For me personally, I think that confidence, like you said, handling the world, but something that I value more and more now is like a man's ability to handle himself. Because when I think about all of the difficulties that I have had in my interpersonal relationships with anybody, but especially with men, whether it's work, friendship, or relationship, it's when they are not able to handle their own emotions, their own thinking, their own perspective, and then that's projected onto me, whether I'm their coworker, their friend, or their partner. So I think confidence, when it comes to how I understand it, and attraction is like that authenticity and that ability to know and understand yourself and be comfortable with yourself first, and then how you present that to the world. And that's going to be different for each person. For some men, it is going to be a little bit of arrogance, a little bit of showmanship, but for other men, it might not manifest in that way. And I think that can be equally attractive. Like, and that's me saying that to guys who don't present in that way, because I think it's easy for shy boys to feel like there isn't a place for them, or there aren't any women that are going to be attracted to them. But it's actually like, it's okay to not be the loudest person in the room, but if you're comfortable with yourself, that automatically stands out in a way to certain women who are attracted to that and value that more than being a little bit of an arsehole, which for some women they do like. In the same way for women, like some guys are going to like women that look a certain way and work a room a certain way, but if you're not that type of girl, you're not like a standard conventional beauty, your ability to own who you are, even if that's different, is going to be attractive to someone as long as you stay true to that.
Yeah, no, which is, some of the most famously physically attractive men in the world date women who you're like, oh, that, they're not like supermodel beautiful, like traditionally conventionally attractive. But when you hear them talk or you see them together, you're like, oh, I get
They're
it.
connected on a deeper level.
There is a connection there. And what I was going to say is your ability to see that, to perceive whether somebody is not necessarily fitting that conventional idea of what confidence looks like, to be able to pick that out in someone is it's like a highly developed skill. So
yeah, it's a skill that you only develop because you develop it within yourself, I think. Like game recognize game at the end of the day, and authentic people are going to attract authentic people. And if you are not being authentic to yourself, you can't expect someone who is authentic to be attracted to you at the end of the day. It's actually that simple. But the process to becoming your authentic self is never ending, and it is hard and it takes effort. But that's why it's worth doing. Because in my experience, like every time I choose to be true to who I am or what I want, it reflects in my outer world as well. Anytime I've like self-abandoned or prioritized someone else's needs at the expense of my own, then it's never gone a way that would be authentic to me, because I wasn't being authentic to begin with. So yeah, I think it's just the process that we all go through, or that I feel like that is everyone's life. That is your life's work, to figure out what's the difference between what you've been told you should do and what do you actually want to do. And that constant negotiation and picking and choosing, like, okay, this is what I should do. I'm okay to do that for now, recognizing that it's going to send me in this direction so that I can do what I want to do, et cetera, et cetera. It's not like one or the other. It's just this like parallel back and forth between the both.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Is it like something that you've been able to recognize more consciously, like in the last few years, do you think?
Yes. Honestly, the last year has been a big process of
realizing things.
Yes, hashtag realizing things. No, it's you know what? I'm fortunate in that I did not have any real rigid expectations of me built into me from childhood, or drilled into me, or whatever. It was just do what makes you happy. Because I think my mum had spent a lot of her life doing what made other people happy, or what she thought would make her happy. And so I think that was my kind of default position from when I was a kid, which was, as long as the first question is, does this make you happy? And that's why I've ended up, you know, in the life that I'm in, where I've just, if something was, you know, I wasn't enjoying living somewhere after you know, spending a lot of time there and doing exactly what I wanted to do, so I moved here. And now, you know, I feel like I'm very, very lucky to have that mindset. So because I have none of those rigid expectations, it hasn't required any work really to I know when I'm doing something I don't want to do, because I never do anything else. So that's really lucky. In theory, that sets me up quite well for a long-term relationship if I want to get into one, I guess. But I just don't. But then I kind of have the other problem, the opposite problem, which is I kind of think no one's ever good enough, you know?
So do you think that's played a part in your previous relationships?
Definitely.
Not good enough in terms of like they can't meet you where you're at in terms of like how you enjoy life?
It's a really unfortunate sounding phrase. And there's a lot of complexity in it that is not, you know, obvious in when I put it that way. But yes, one thing is, you know, I have this life that I love and I get to do all these amazing things. Who am I willing to sacrifice that for? And, you know, not necessarily...
Or do you even need to sacrifice, but, like, who can fit into that with you?
Exactly, yeah.
And then is their life that great that you want a part in their life too?
Exactly. And, you know, all I can do is continue being as authentic as I can as much of the time as I can, because, you know, it's not something that no one's going to be able to do it all the time in every situation, right? Just try your little old best.
Yeah, it's a benchmark that you aspire to, not a place that you land at forever.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, hopefully that aligns with somebody at some point, or it doesn't. I prefer that it does.
But in the past, you feel like you weren't connecting or meeting people that were able to be a part of your life in that way.
Yeah.
Or in a way that you would require for a long-term commitment.
Yes.
Did you have like relationships where they wanted long-term commitment and you weren't able to give it to them? Or do you think it was just like either you were approaching it as like see where it goes, or it was like you know that it's going to end in a certain amount of time? Because I think yeah, like were the types of relationships you were in like the other person wanted long-term commitment from you and you didn't want to give it, or you wanted long-term commitment and they didn't? Or it was just like...
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I was probably always just kind of keeping my options open.
So you were like never really as open to commitment as you...
So somebody asked me a really great question recently when this was 7 a.m. on a balcony in Miami, like with a bunch of people I'd just met, some amazing people that I'd just met that night. This was in December, and just having sometimes that happens, right? And you end up in these conversations with something clicks with people, and you're like, this group, I need to spend more time with this group. And so we all ended up going back to this house all together, had breakfast on the balcony, and this there's this one dude I was talking to who was a poet, and he said, he asked about, we started talking about relationships, and he asked me about what kind of challenges do I face, or am I seeing it at the time? I was like, yeah, I'm sort of weirdly sort of kind of keeping my options open, as I always do. And he was like, well, how are you going to approach things differently this time? I said, do you know what? If I'm going to approach it differently this time, I would say the way I would do things differently is that I'm just going to give it a bit more time. I'm going to let it breathe a bit and not have any, just see what develops. Mm-hmm. And he said...
So in the past, you didn't let it develop?
Yeah, I was like, oh, the first sign of neediness? Sorry. No, cut it off. Because the attraction would the attraction would just go. The attraction would just be gone. If someone, because neediness is one of the most unattractive things that we, like in the initial stages anyway.
Right.
A certain amount of emotional dependence on someone else is totally natural once you have established that, right?
Yeah. So what's your, how did you understand neediness when you experienced it and it turned you off?
Someone saying, I'm really needy tonight.
Oh.
This was, I need some attention.
And how far into the relationship would this be, or into the dating would this be?
Couple months, maybe not even that.
Okay.
And I was working. It was late, and she knew I work late, and said, "Oh, I'm feeling needy. I need attention." And I was like, but I responded with something like, "Oh, we're probably not going to be able to see you in person tonight because I'm working, but we can text," or something like that. Not a flat out rejection, but also like setting boundaries. So it's that kind of stuff. And what this guy said when I said, I'm going to give it time this time, and this is referring to the same relationship actually, which ended really badly recently. Not badly, but just like really unpleasantly.
We can get into that after what the poet said.
Yeah. He said, after what the poet said, he said, he was like, maybe you need to give yourself more time. Not give it more time, as in the relationship. Give yourself some time. And I was like, okay, that's probably an interesting way of reframing it.
Yeah. Process how you feel about this person, how you feel in their presence with them.
Just be absent of expectations.
Yeah. I think keep your standards high. Keep your expectations low, but your standards high. So ultimately what you're like, what you want, what you will and won't compromise on. But you need to give yourself space to be who you are, for them to connect with that, and then give them space to be who they are, to see if you connect with that too. Mm-hmm. So, bad breakup, the most recent one.
Oh, it's almost weird to call it a breakup, but so we had a really great, excellent chemistry, great first few dates, slept together on the second date, which honestly for me is a
turn off.
No. That is something that I found out later that she would have slept with me on the first date. But I actually had to go home and work. Slept together on the second date, and there was instant, there's great chemistry here, right? And I like to find that out soon after I've established that I'm comfortable with and attracted to somebody on a first date. I like to, even on a first date, I probably would sleep with somebody if it was there, if like all that was right. But I like to establish sexual chemistry as quickly as possible after the first date.
Yeah, I think there's also a lot of discussion around like when should or shouldn't you sleep with somebody. And my personal opinion is like for women, like I would say avoid the first date, but after the first date, if you feel comfortable with them, in terms of like if you want to, firstly, that's most important for a woman. And then also like don't worry about whether they see or don't see value in you because you've chosen to after on the second or after, you know, because I think if two people are genuinely attracted to each other and they're moving in the same direction, it's not going to matter down the line whether it was the second or the third date. But I also don't think you need to hold out longer than you would want to if you genuinely do like somebody and they are expressing that interest towards you as well. But I guess there's a lot of games in a lot of people's like dating experience that can make it seem like you need to have a hard and fast rule. But none of the guys that I know are like, oh, she's a whore if it's like the second or if it's the first or the second. But I do see like a lot of information online, like from men that I personally would not even attracted to, would never even consider dating, telling women what they can and can't do with their body.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah. Okay. And sorry. Continue.
And also, society as a whole is has that, you know, that prejudice built in, I guess, and it's and so I understand why women would feel like withholding that is withholding is like, you know, doing something empowering.
Self-protection, yeah.
Yeah. But for me, you know, and this is just personally for me, sexual chemistry and an interest in sex as a topic and a comfort with expressing yourself that way is something that I rate very highly. So yeah, that's, you know, I went out on a really nice date with somebody recently, who I chatted up in a coffee shop actually, which was actually probably the first person who I'd someone who I'd, it was this year, who I chatted up in person and then went out on a date with. And we had a nice time. At the end of the date, you know, I felt like there was a good vibe and went to kiss her and she kissed me back, but in a really almost surprised and like in a way that was just like not, it felt like suddenly I realized there wasn't a connection there just from the physicality of it. And and then that for me was like, I can tell very quickly now when someone has hang-ups about sexuality.
Interesting.
And I feel like I can detect that. I can see that coming a mile off. Was that for me? And, you know, not judging, people have those things for reasons that are not their own fault, but is it something that I want to deal with? Probably not. Yeah.
It's just about compatibility. Like, you know, if someone's at that place, if that's something that's important to you and it's not as important to them or they're not as comfortable with it, then you just have to kind of like call it as you see it, I think. I personally, that made me think about my own experience, and I think like there have been times where I've connected with someone on a physical level very early on, but then there's also been times where it started off not as I expected, a little bit awkward maybe, but then it definitely developed into like beyond anything that was like immediately, you know, like there were times where it's like really hot to begin with and then it dies very quickly. And then there's been other situations where it started off where like not really sure about each other yet, but then it develops into something that is beyond the like short-lived passion in those like other things. So maybe you can give yourself more time now and then, but if you do genuinely believe you can spot it, then by all means.
I mean, all I'm going from is past experience and probabilities. When I have given it more time, and I've always, at the end, been like, I should have, and I'd be like, I should have seen this coming. So I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to stick with my instincts on that one.
Yeah, I'm just providing a contrast.
No. And both are correct. You know, there's both of those things can be true.
So your bad breakup though, that's what we're trying to.
Yeah. So
was it the worst breakup you've ever had? That one that you alluded to?
No, it was weird. It was weird. Because we, we were both traveling a lot. But when we did, we both lived in the same part of town, and were attracted to each other and had good chemistry, which in LA you might as well marry somebody if if that happens, because you never meet people in your neighborhood. So, and it takes so long to get to any other neighborhood. So physical, geographical proximity is a big plus. And, you know, I think compatible values-wise and like life path-wise, you know, and interests-wise, I will admit that I was sort of keeping I guess, in the interests of letting someone have their space, I was probably keeping my options open as well, saying like, you know, I'm not going to put too much expectation on this one person, because
Were you
she had
dating
also...
other people at the same time?
Yes. And she had just got out of a 3-year relationship a few months before and was clearly in the process of, you know, she had gone to a different concert every weekend ever since breaking up with that person. Like, okay, this is someone who's in a time of self-discovery as well, and it's great to meet someone in that time, right? So I also didn't want to put too much expectation.
Was this communicated, or it was just assumed?
I guess assumed. You know, we'd have a really great time together, and then I guess I was, you know, thinking back on it, I probably like signaled in some ways without saying it, you know, without being, you know, without using my words.
Yes, as men do sometimes.
Yeah,
as women do as well. As people do. As people do. It's gender neutral and inclusive.
When they're not being their best selves. To, you know, that I wasn't that serious about taking things more seriously. But we did, you know, we were starting to meet each other's friends more, and we were, you know, that seemed like a comfortable, and we both seemed excited about that. So yeah, I'm struggling to even like, it's weird. A few weeks ago, maybe like a month and a half ago, this was like so present in my mind, and now I'm already forgetting what what the details were. But so she was away a lot, and I was traveling too, and then there's a few times when we'd made plans, and then she broke those plans, and I was like, oh, that's fine, you know, people change, you know, I get tired from traveling or whatever, things happen. I was like, yeah, fine. But there was this one time where I said, hey, I'm going to do a brunch. I'm going to cook breakfast tacos and for you and for two of my closest friends, and I would love to put on this documentary that I think all three of you would love, and you get to meet these two, you know, people. And she's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And then just didn't show up. And well, that's what I thought, and that's what I said, you know. And on that, and I felt like at that point that was a game. And I was like, hang on, what's going on? Because I kind of knew that she wasn't going to show up. I kind of had that, you know, when you just have that feeling. And I had a great time with my friends, you know. Yeah. But then afterwards I said, hey, regardless of who someone is to me, that's not acceptable behavior to me from anyone, even from a casual acquaintance. You know, if someone says they're not going to show up to something where 4 people are going to be, and then they say they're going to show up and then they don't. I've put in effort to...
at least say you're not coming, or...
Yeah, well, like last minute. Right. When I'd already prepped all the food. And, you know, I'd clearly gone to a lot of effort, clearly meant a lot to me. I said, you know, that's I see that as rude. And it's not behaviour that I would tolerate from anybody, regardless of who they are to me. And then I got a message back that night saying, I don't think that this is not a priority for me. You know, stuff that like was so incongruous with her behavior before that. She was like, dating is not a priority for me now, so I can't give you all the attention that you need. Let's just be platonic friends or something like that. I was like, that's an overreaction where someone's reacting rather than responding, right? So
she didn't apologize for not being able to make it either.
Apologize for not being able to fulfill my needy needs.
But she didn't apologize for like not being able to make it to the brunch either, or she was just like, I can't come.
It was like, oh, I feel sick.
Okay, but because I feel like there's a difference in terms of like obviously for your specific circumstance, you had the feeling, etc. And it's like maybe it could be redeemable if it was like she was like, oh, I'm so sorry, I can't make it, I'll make it up to you. Like that's how you work through together versus like, I can't make it. And it's like
Yeah.
she didn't like reassure you in a way that felt that you were valued or that your effort was being valued, right?
Yeah, I think she was trying to provoke a reaction, and she got
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
And then the next day she said, "Oh, I said, look, that seems to be a bit of an overreaction. Are you sure that that's how you feel? Because it's somewhat incongruous with all of your behaviour." And the next day she wrote back saying, sorry about that. I feel like that was an overreaction. I can't remember exactly what we said. We'll talk it out. So we did. So I was traveling then, not long afterwards. So we talked while I was traveling, and we said, let's give it a few weeks because we're both working and both traveling. So let's give it some time. She was going through beginning the process of freezing her eggs as well.
Wow.
And which is, and obviously I respect that process so much about it's so much to go through. So I was like, and I really supported that. So I was like, okay, cool. Let's give it a few weeks. And then after a couple of weeks, I realized that I was feeling like I wanted to start talking again. And so I said, and I was like, I would not be being honest with myself if I didn't express this. So I sent her a message saying, hi, I would, if I'm being totally, the simplest and most honest way to say this is, I would like to start seeing you again. What are your thoughts on that? That was, I think, on a Thursday. And then by the Sunday, still no response. And on the Sunday, I posted I was DJing at something and I was wearing a suit and someone posted a picture of me and I reposted it and just looked really cool DJing in a nice suit, right? And she responded to it on Instagram. This is so petty, but responded to it on Instagram with a fire emoji. And I was like, oh, maybe she just didn't see the message, because if someone's doing that. So I responded saying, oh yeah, it's nice to break out the suit now and again. By the way, did you see my message the other day? Read and not responded. The end.
Whoa. Damn.
Yeah, so not the most, it's unfortunate, but also probably fortunate, as I said, I wasn't
Rejection is protection.
Yeah. But like I said, I probably also wasn't being my best self. And she, probably weren't being the right people for the right moment, weren't the right person for each other at the right moment.
Based on your dating experiences so far, if you had the opportunity to date someone you've already dated, because I guess it's not like you've had any long-term relationships, you would like get back together with an ex necessarily, but like if you had the opportunity to date someone that you've already dated, would you take it?
I mean, I think I'd always be open to seeing how the connection between me and that person had changed, and how I'd be interested in seeing how they had evolved and how and how I had changed and whether that would fit together. I would always be open to that. It's not, but I'm also open to, just like I'm open to anybody who I find attractive. Because I was just cycling back through my mind there, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess I would always be open to any, even the girl that in college who physically used to beat me up and rip my clothes. Actually, probably not her. Yeah,
It doesn't have to be everyone you've ever dated, just like if there was anyone. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely wouldn't be a hard no.
Yeah. Okay, so we're reaching the end of this episode. Thank you for being a guest. Please reveal your star sign and your personality type if you know it.
Well, I already said when my birthday is.
No, but that's not on the record. That was in our pre-thing. So,
oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, what's your star sign?
The worst one is all. My star sign is the worst one that everybody hates.
Go on, say it.
May Gemini.
And do you know your rising and your moon sign?
What's that thing that if he knows his big three, then run?
Yeah. But
I
you know
don't.
it, don't you? You don't
No,
know
I
it.
don't. I actually don't know.
But you've dated so many people. No girl has ever been like, give me your birth time and put it in the thing.
No, because I.
Don't tell them.
Well, someone might have, and that might have happened, but I didn't remember it because I put very little to no stock
Importance on them.
in astrology. Zero, I would say.
Okay.
Zero importance
So,
on astrology.
do you know your Myers-Briggs?
I did find it out once, but I immediately forgot it because I was like, I'm way more complicated. I'm so much more complicated than a 4-letter acronym.
Okay.
I realize that these things. I mean, definitely Myers-Briggs. I'm sure that is. It is a lot more. Astrology I just see as a useful vocabulary with which to talk about ourselves without talking about ourselves.
Yeah, I think both astrology and Myers-Briggs, like, they're just, for me, I think they're more like tools for self-reflection. So like, oh, this is your zodiac. Do you resonate with these things or not? How are you similar or different? The same with like a Myers-Briggs. It's like everybody has the ability to be introverted or extroverted or feeling or perceiving or whatever. It's like what you might, it categorizes like what you would lean towards or default towards. And then you can reflect on, okay, if it's saying that I'm more introverted, are there ways that I can develop more extroversion if I want to? Or like, how can I better understand myself? I don't think it's like a cut and dry, like, this is what you are, this is all you can be. But it's like, I'm only using this question at the end to be like, for people who are interested to, instead of at the beginning, because I don't want to set
yes.
I don't want to set like a rigid framework for people to then listen to the episode through. But if you did know what it was and you find it at the end, like, does what you have said or the discussion that we've had, like, align or not align with what you would be categorized as under these things?
And the people who would think about this whole conversation differently because of hearing about my star sign are the reason why I don't ever mention my star sign, because it's because the way you just described it, it's a vocabulary and it's a framework to reflect on whether we're different or similar to it. That I'm totally on board with. That's not how the vast majority of people see it.
Yeah.
And,
like, for me, I don't care that much about the star sign of like the people that I date. I mean, I'll make jokes about it if they do, like, if some of their behavior aligns with like the stereotype of their star sign. But, like, I have friends that are really into astrology. They can do birth chart readings, they can do compatibility readings. I'm like, don't tell me any of that shit until I feel like I really know this person and I trust them. Even then, I don't necessarily want to know.
So I think if somebody really, this is why it perpetuates itself as well, because if somebody really identifies with the traits of their star sign, then chances are you're more likely to believe that it's real, that it's a science, if it really describes you well. And then when you meet somebody and you get into a conversation about astrology, chances are theirs describes them well as well. You see what I mean? So that is how it perpetuates itself. People go, oh, I'm so good at reading people because whenever I get into a conversation about astrology, I'm always able to guess what that person. And sometimes I will say, like, people will be like, oh, especially living here. Living in LA. It's actually illegal to not know your big three. So I could be arrested for the conversation we're having right now. And there's probably people who are listening to this going, oh my God, that's such a May Gemini thing to say. Which is why it's sometimes when I'm talking to people and they say like, oh, you don't believe in this stuff. And I'll be like, and they'll be like, well, there is a lot of meaning to it, and it is. And I will say, well, okay, well, I'm a Taurus, and they will say, huh, and I'll go, do you think this is a really Taurus attitude? And they'll be like, actually, yes, I probably could have guessed that. And be like, well, I'm not a fucking Taurus, so.
I'm a May Gemini, and then they're
exactly.
like, oh, well, then there you go.
Oh well, you're on the cusp, so yeah.
Okay, so final question. that I like to conclude these episodes with. Based on what you know about me, what kind of man or relationship do you think would be best for me, or do you think that I'm prone to be in? I mean, we don't talk that much about dating anymore, but like, I just, for the purposes of entertainment, humour me and the audience.
Let's see. That's interesting. All I really have to go on is the short conversations that is this conversation really, because we haven't talked on this level of depth for a long time. And I'm just kind of learning a lot about you right now. All the things that came into my mind when you asked that question were very funny, but also things that weren't serious.
Yeah, but that's great. Share. It's not like I'm going to place weight on what you say, but it's like I just want to know what you would say.
Oh, you say that.
I mean, I could be married for all you know.
I don't know who anyone should be with, really.
But it's like, who do you think I would be? What type of person do you think I would be suitable for? Or would be suitable for me? See, because you don't know star signs, you can't just be like, you should be with a Leo, Amber.
Yeah, it's knowing about star signs. This is the one time when I've wished this would come in handy. Maybe this would be a good skill to learn. Maybe you should be with someone who doesn't care about star signs.
That's all you have?
And doesn't know their Myers-Briggs. And, someone, I don't know. Are you able to answer this question for other people?
Yeah, but it's just what I think. It doesn't necessarily mean it's what they think, but it's just like, okay, based on what I know about this person, I think they would be with, or they would be great with someone who works in finance, who is doing this, doing that. And like, that doesn't mean that it's true, but it's just like the impression that someone gives you. It doesn't mean that it has to be that way or that they have to want it that way, but it's just like a game that you might play with your friends. Like, yeah, I can imagine you with someone who does this, or someone who's looks like this or is into this, or someone who appreciates these parts of you, someone who will support you in this.
I feel like this is almost the whole point of the whole podcast, and I just can't come up with anything.
Well, you tried.
No, this is it's just such a hard question, because when you see people with people that you feel like, oh, that is a really good match. It's so easy in retrospect to say like, oh, this is why. It's like it's confirmation bias or whatever. That kind of thing is almost impossible to predict. I feel like, okay,
you don't have to predict though. It's just like you're
not predict. But yeah, predict was the wrong word. But at a basic level, I think you need stimulating conversation. Someone who takes themselves seriously, takes life seriously. That is honestly all I've got.
Okay, great. I'm just to see what different answers people come up with.
Yeah,
every dude is going to have a different perception.
Like a load of dumb joke answers, but none of them were serious.
But you can share those too. It's not that serious.
Well, it's not funny
maybe
now,
they're not
it?
that funny. Yeah, that's why I didn't say it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Ash. Love to see the growth that you've undergone in the past few years. Very happy for
thank you. It's kind of really coming in now. You see, listeners, I'm gesturing to my beard that.
Yeah, I was alluding to the emotional and spiritual growth, and he was alluding to his beard. So
I feel like it's manifesting my beard and my or my some other kind of facial hair, just to not give away any identifying characteristics. She was referring to my very bushy eyebrows. That's the main growth that I've seen in the.
Yes.
And I got a bit taller as well. I'm a tall man with bushy eyebrows.
Thank you. Speak soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Send me your thoughts and feedback to @AmberAkilla or @friend.crush on Instagram. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on Instagram, TikTok, SoundCloud, Spotify, etc., etc. Make sure you drink lots of water. Tell your friends and family that you love them. I'll speak to you soon. Go be a better person. Bye.